Intertalk Radio, you're in to all things music.
Working with different companies, and I always tell my team, make big mistakes. And they usually look at me with this strange look, and they say, you surely don't mean that. Don't you want to make no mistakes, or at most small mistakes? And I said, no, small mistakes means you're careless. When you make no mistakes, it means you took no risk, and we're going to be obsolete in no time because we're going to be doing the same old, and other people are innovating.
Welcome to Making It with Terry Woolman, the show that explores the secrets, successes, and strategies for making it in the music biz. And now, here's your host, Terry Woolman.
Welcome to the show, and thanks for tuning in. I want to let you know how much I appreciate you joining us every week on our show. If you missed last week's interview, you can hear it and all of our episodes at entertalkradio.com/makingit, or download our app and take us with you. So often I get asked questions about the creative process, so I created this show to focus on what it takes to have a lasting career in the ever-changing landscape of the music business. You're really in for a treat, as I've invited my friends, some of the best and brightest in music, to share their stories on how they've influenced the music that has shaped our lives. I also, on occasion, bring in people that are non-musicians, but who are people that I also consider artists. And I have one of those guests today. I guarantee you're going to love it. So let's get started. My guest today is Marilyn Tam. Marilyn Tam PhD is a speaker, author, consultant, and board-certified executive leadership coach. She was formerly the CEO of Aveda, president of Reebok Apparel and Retail Group, vice president of Nike, and a successful entrepreneur who built 4 companies. Her life is an inspiring example of what can be achieved if one follows their dreams. Marilyn grew up as an abused and neglected child in Hong Kong, left home as a teen to come to America alone, and went on to achieve international business and humanitarian success. Her award-winning book, The Happiness Choice, shows how and why happiness is crucial for business productivity and success, and for your physical, emotional, spiritual, and financial health. Please welcome my guest today, Marilyn Tam. Hi, Marilyn.
Hi, Terry. Good to hear your voice.
Likewise, and I'm so looking forward to spending the hour with you. So our listeners know you and I have been friends for many years. However, we don't get to see each other very often, but you are always in my heart and in my thoughts, and I'm always following and inspired by the work that you do. And not just in business, but certainly your humanitarian efforts and achievements and passion that you have for that. And I also consider you an artist in the way that you live your life. So although you are not a musician, in my mind, you are as much an artist as I am and so many other guests on this show. So I want to start very briefly with just talking about how you grew up in a traditional Chinese family in Hong Kong. And as you've described, your childhood was not an easy one. What was it like growing up in your family? And as a child, did you ever envision the inspired life that you've created for yourself?
Well, thank you, Terry. First of all, I'm thrilled that you consider me an artist, because in my own way, I believe that I am an artist, because if you live your life just from your head, it just isn't going to be fun or rewarding in any sense of the word. And also, not only that, you could not have the kind of success that you've experienced in your life and that I've experienced, because it has to be the connection for the creative side of each person, because everything, if we do it with passion and love, has to be creative. So I just want to first say that. But as far as my childhood,
that's a great point, though. I mean, and it's so interesting because I can't help think that, I have certainly met financially successful people who they certainly have passion, but they don't have, they don't seem to have a lot of joy. They are not selfless. They are selfish sometimes in the way that they operate in business. But, as a corporate CEO of some pretty major corporations, I know you've had the opportunity to work with both types of people, people that follow business as an artist and life as an artist like you do, and people that just, I think, put money before anything else. I mean, before we talk about your childhood, because you brought it up, what's your point of view on that?
Thank you, because I totally agree with you. There are successful people. As you mentioned, one of the things I do is I am also an executive coach. And what I do is I coach some of the Fortune 100 leaders on basically how to integrate everything they have in their lives, because they have already been very financially successful. They have the third and fourth house. They have their however number of cars they have. They're on their third or fourth or fifth spouse, which they consider, a mark of success. but they aren't happy. And when we delve into it, it's because what they have done is really followed some prescription of what it takes to be, quote, successful and happy. But they haven't aligned it with their own hearts and souls. So they are working super hard. These people work beyond hard. It's just amazing. I mean, I work hard and I know you work hard, but these people are just so driven. That's right. All they think about, which is why everything else in their lives falls apart. Even with a personal trainer, even with a personal chef, even with a private plane, their lives are still not rewarding or effective. And there's this hollowness because of that. As compared to the ones I work with who are creating from expression, from feeling the creativity, which is actually inherent in every one of us. It may be expressed differently, because if I had to be like you and try to play an instrument or something, I would be really suffering. But yet in each one of us, there is a creative spark. And that's what we have to align with to be successful, truthfully, because ultimately, including these very, in parentheses, successful people, sooner or later they crash. Why? Because there's inner hollowness, which trips them up eventually, because it's almost a self-perpetuating policy or philosophy that one day they're going to just wake up and say, I should have done something else. And that moment hits them sooner or later. And usually that's when they come to me and they say, what's wrong? And so, yes, there's a distinction. And the people who really create from the joy of creating, of living their life passion, it's a very different way. They can be working as hard, but it's not so effortful. I mean, it's not like they get to go to work instead of they have to go to work.
Right. That's an artist approach to life.
Mm-hmm.
So as a young girl, you were the second daughter in your family, followed by, I believe, two brothers, and which left you sort of kind of stuck in this nowhere land in your family of not really being considered important. And did you, as a young girl, when you were struggling, and learning how to survive in that kind of environment, did you envision this life that you have now?
Absolutely not. I was just trying not to be beat anytime.
Right.
I was like three brothers. So It was, and by age 7, my parents actually gave me away. Not because they were poor. Actually, my family's quite wealthy, but they just didn't want another girl. So I was given away to my aunt and uncle, who lived in the country. And for a number of years, from 7 to 11, I lived with them, having a very different experience, because my aunt and uncle basically turned me over to working with their maid's daughter. So we ended up assembling plastic flowers and embroidering needlepoint handbags. So we have a term for that now. It's called child labor. But those days, we don't have that term. And I probably would have stayed there actually reasonably happy because nobody was beating me and nobody was telling me I was worse than dirt or a poor excuse for a pregnancy. So it was a different existence because what it does to a person's soul when in my case, when I was basically said, you're no good because of your gender, which is something I can't control.
Right.
That really is a helpless feeling. And so if I didn't have some huge transformation in my life, I definitely wouldn't be speaking to you. And I absolutely had no vision that I would be living the life I do now when I was then. But when I was 11, my aunt and uncle had their first child, and it was a boy. And so I was sent back to my parents' home. And in that place, my life... Were you afraid to go home? It was sobering because the realization was that I really had no control over my life at all.
Right.
And that feeling is a very helpless feeling. It's more than afraid. It's beyond desperation. It's just, what do you do in a situation like that? You just, because at that age, I wasn't capable of doing too much yet. Right. I did think about running away and going to just, continue my life that I had, which is embroidering handbags and assembling plastic flowers. But the good news is, yes, there's the good news out of this horrible story.
Yes, there is.
Is my family, as I mentioned, was really wealthy. So they sent me to a private school because, we can't have a child that's not well educated. It would be an embarrassment to the family.
Right.
So I went to a beautiful, very respected private school, and there I met the girl who really changed my life. Her name was Rebecca. She was my classmate, and she and her whole family, father, mother, brother, sister, and herself, lived in a room, and they shared a bathroom and a kitchen with two more families. And at the end of the month, they didn't have enough food to eat, and that situation filled me with outrage. I couldn't believe why two working parents could not afford to feed their children or to have some kind of living, which was a little bit past basically survival. And so that really triggered me to make a difference. I just swore then, I didn't know how to swear, but I just vowed to myself that I was going to help people like Rebecca when I grew up. So that's really the defining change in my life, is to recognize and meet Rebecca and to know that as bad as my life was, there are people whose lives were so much worse through no fault of their own, because I always had enough to eat. No matter what happened, I did. So that is really the transforming difference that I had.
So, part of the reason that I want you on this show today, that I invited you, was to share some of your wisdom and tips and experience, which we're going to get to in a moment. But I want people to understand where you learn this and why you learn this, and more importantly, the importance of the transformation when you come from so little. And I'm not talking about financially so little, but from love and respect and caring and feeling a sense of self-worth. And basically, according to common wisdom, you didn't really have the advantages needed to be successful in life. You grew up in a foreign country where English was a second language. You went to a state university instead of getting into an Ivy League school. And instead of being one of the guys in a man's world, you're a woman. But you still say my life has proven that what I had was enough.
Mhm.
That's a powerful statement.
Absolutely. Because each one of us have a burning passion in us, and we each are born with a life purpose. And unfortunately, so much of the media today tell us what we're supposed to believe, what we're supposed to do, what we're supposed to look like, how we should act and do to be happy. And that's really where the error comes in. Because once we give up our own dreams and try to follow somebody else's version of what life should be like, we're never fulfilled. And in that place, we're never going to be able to achieve our potential. I was fortunate in the sense that in spite of a list of handicaps that people would consider that I had in my life, I found my passion, my life purpose early. And I, give thanks to Rebecca for triggering what I was already in me. We may have outside triggers to awaken ourselves to our passion, but that passion is ours alone. And when we follow that passion, and I'm not saying it's easy, things change. Things change because we can look at obstacles differently. And I can tell, stories of some of the obstacles. But the point really is if we're just doing something because we feel like we have to, it's very different than when you say, if I get through this is what's going to be on the other side. And when we have that perspective, things transform because we're not dealing now with just a mind thing. This is a heart and alignment issue, which if you believe in something greater, whether you call it God, spirit, nature, whatever you want to call it, if you align with that, with what you are, the whole universe conspires to support you.
That's a powerful statement. and you've seen that in action, not just in your life, but in the lives of people that you've coached or at the seminars that you've taught or people who you've met who have read your books.
Yes.
So I know you're not just speaking from your own personal experience. You see this action repeat itself over and over again.
Absolutely. And it's just it just touches my heart. It makes me feel like I'm actually doing something good because I can share this philosophy, this truth, and transform other people's lives so that they too are finding their happiness. Because ultimately, that's all everybody is looking for. I mean, in our country, the pursuit of happiness is written in our Constitution. But if you talk to anybody in the world, if you ask them, what would you like to see your child or somebody you really care about? Usually the sense, no matter how the translation came about, it's really ultimately I want them to be happy. So that's really inherent in us. Yet how we go about thinking that we're going to achieve our happiness is where we get stumbled.
Well, let's dig in then. One of the important questions that you ask in your most recent book is, what are you doing each day to achieve your dream life? Mm-hmm. Can you talk about those things and your tips for our listeners?
Yes, thank you. We've been talking around it. The main thing is, what is your purpose? Why are you here? Why were you born? Because we each born with a different purpose. Terry, in your case, is you to make music, to transform people's hearts and open them up to the possibilities that music can. Music is the sound, is the first sense we have. So you just diving right into people's hearts and souls through the most powerful media that exists. So you've already aligned with your life purpose. And it's wonderful to see, and congratulations on your success with it too. So each person has to find.
And thank you for understanding. I agree with you. That people forget that that artist, certainly myself as a musician, we're in the healing business. Mm-hmm. We're in the joy business, and and opening, presenting opportunities for people to experience joy and emotion. And so it's nice to be acknowledged, and that you understand that. But of course you do. I mean, that's your life purpose also. So, but I appreciate the compliment. Thank you, Marilyn.
Oh, it comes from my heart. It's true, because music is healing. Music is transforming. Music is, as you say, creates joy. It's all those things. Depending on where a person is, music can help take them to the next level, whatever it is that they need at that moment. So it's wonderful. Thank you for what you do.
As you're welcome. And as a matter of fact, I'm remembering right now, one of the artists that I've had the pleasure to tour and record with is Keb Mo, who's a beautiful singer-songwriter blues artist, Grammy Award winning. But when I went out on the road with him and spent a year in his band, he told me after our very first concert, he said, I want you to understand that we're in the happiness business. This, not the music business, the happiness business. That's our job.
That's right.
And I just remembered him saying that from what we're talking about right now. So what are some of the tips on how, to answer that question? What are you doing each day to achieve your dream life?
Well, first of all, many people don't even know what their dream life is. So first of all, they have to find out what it is.
Good point.
And people start panicking because they say, I'm 30, I'm 40, I'm 50, I'm 60, whatever age they are. I don't know it yet. First of all, I have to say, don't panic. Because I work with, as I mentioned to you, some very well-accomplished people who are of significant age who haven't found it yet. But it doesn't matter what age you are, you can change it now. And so it's just to take the time to take that pause to ask yourself the questions that have been suppressed for so long, which is, what are you here for? Why are you here on this planet? What would you like to have in your tombstone? If you're going to have a tombstone, what would you like to be remembered for? Because there's a hospice nurse, and she wrote a book, and she said, with working with all these people over the years that were on the way to transition out of this lifetime, all the regrets, the 5 top regrets they have, were all around what they didn't do. So a lot of times we live our lives in denial of ourselves. So just to take that time out and pause and say, what is it that I really want to do that I'm not doing? Or if I'm doing it only in part, how can I accentuate that more? And so every day, as you said, when you wake up, you can ask yourself, am I moving closer to what I want, or am I moving further away? And then when you answer that question, you know how to align your day. How can I make it more about what it is that I want, instead of just going through the motions because somebody told me this is what I should be doing?
Right. That makes sense.
It's powerful and also scary.
Yeah, right. But what do you encourage people to do with the fear when they? Because
fear is really projecting into what may happen in the future. So if we look at that and say, okay, what am I afraid of? Why am I afraid of looking at what I really want? Is it because I'm afraid that I won't succeed in it? Is it because it's going to be too big for me? Maybe it's not socially approved? Why? If you ask yourself the next question, then the next question will come up, which is, okay, whatever it shows up, it's because I don't think my parents will approve. Okay, how can you deal with that? Then the next question comes. What if, just ask the worst case scenario, what if they really don't like it? Then what happens? Are you willing to give up your whole life to appease somebody else? I can give a beautiful story about this. A good friend of mine from college. His name is Henry, and he's the eldest son. He's also Chinese, and he's the eldest son in the family. So there's a lot of pressure on him to succeed in the traditional way, which is in some profession that was well accepted. He can be a doctor, he can be an engineer, he can be a business person, something with a title that people understand. So he was going to be an engineer. So by accident, or not by accident, second year of college, he went into a video class. And he loved it. He loved performing. He loved doing everything to do with motion pictures, TV, all the other things. So he switches major into the arts. Mm-hmm. But he was too afraid to tell his parents. So his parents didn't know he was going to school because he's working also. He was didn't come from a wealthy family. He was working to go through school. So when he got done with school, he applied and got a scholarship to New York State to get a master's in fine art. And only after he got the scholarship did he dare tell his parents that he was going to not become an engineer. He was going to be a movie producer, a director. And it did not go well. It did not go well. He wanted to be a director. That was his dream. But he appeased them because he said, I got a scholarship. I must have talent. They're giving me a free ride to do this. Fast forward, he actually won an Emmy and he's been very successful.
That's fantastic.
Teaches at USC, not full-time, part-time, to teach other students about directing. So it's his way of giving back. He still does movies. And actually, he was invited to go back to China and did a TV series. I forget the name. I don't watch TV so much. But so he's become very successful to the point that his parents, because he went to China and he did a movie in Taiwan too, he was successful in his own world where he came from in something that they could not believe that their son can make a career out of. So sometimes even the worst case scenario, even my parents hate it, they're going to disown me. Sooner or later, they come around. And even they don't come around, like my parents died without really truly acknowledging me to my face. I knew that in some ways they were happy and proud of what I've accomplished. So sometimes not sometimes, all the time, you really have to live your life because everybody else's life is taken already.
Right. Every day and every moment. Right. Because everybody else's life is already taken. You know, there's also another really wonderful quote on your website that I'm looking at right now that just says, it's by Henry Ford. And it says, think you can, think you can't. Either way, you'll be right.
Exactly.
And that's a great example of that. And so is your life. And frankly, so is mine, you know, to basically just move forward with or without the support of our family members and just, you know, believing in yourself. Can I just mention a couple of like points in your book and have you elaborate on them?
Of course, please.
One of them is you're good enough just as you are. And you basically say you don't have to wait for anything, anyone, or any situation before you can start making a positive change in your life.
Mm-hmm. And that's so true because most of us, and it's definitely true in my case, I was always told that I wasn't good enough. I mean, by the very definition of who I was, i.e. just being a girl, I was never going to be good enough. So most of us live with this fear that if they really knew who I was, they wouldn't like me, or they won't think that I'm good enough. So we all live with this phobia, if you will, that some parts of us are not acceptable. So the first thing we can do to shift that thinking is to just claim our own power. I'm good enough for me now. And then from there, you can get whatever you need. If you need more training, you can get the training. If you need to work out, you can work out. If you need to make some kind of effort, whether it's at work, socially, physically, whatever, you can do it. But you're good enough now. So don't beat yourself down because there's plenty of people ready and willing to do that because the whole society is geared around if you got this, whatever it is, this cereal, this car, this house, this date, then you'll be better. So we're always on this endless quest to do something so that we can be okay. So it's an endless hunger, and we're always unhappy because we're not where we need to be. And guess what? When you get that cereal, that car, that dress, that shoes, that date, whatever it is, it's not enough still, because there's something else you're supposed to do to get better. So this shift around and thinking, I'm good enough now. What do I really need to fulfill my dreams? And just move from there.
That's very clear. Here's some key points that you've also mentioned in your book, because you talk about not falling down, but falling forward. So explain that before I start writing down a few of these other tips that you suggested. I get it, falling forward, but what does it mean to you?
We all make mistakes. And when we make mistakes, because of what I just mentioned and we talked about earlier, which is we don't think like we're good enough, then when we make a mistake, it's almost an affirmation that we're not good enough because we messed up. But instead of thinking of that, is just say, what can I learn from this, quote, mistake? Mistake only means that I missed the mark. That means I can try again. And also I know how to not do what I did before, because this time I know better. Edison was famous in saying, when he's trying to find a filament for the light bulb and it wasn't working, wasn't working. And I think he tried like 10,000 ways. And people says, you should give up. This is like ridiculous. You spent all this time, effort, money, etc., trying to find it's not working. And he says, no, I've just spent 10,000 ways that didn't work. Now I have a narrow range of what's going to work. And of course, we have lights now, thanks to his not giving up.
Right.
He fell forward. He just tried again.
That's a great example. All right, let's go over some tips. One of your tips is be prepared.
One thing
How would you? Yeah, go ahead.
Please go ahead, please.
Yeah, I want to have you elaborate on your tips, so that you can give just a short overview, or this would be a weekend seminar.
Be prepared, because a lot of times we just are, what's the word? We anticipate the worst, and then we don't know how to deal with the best or anything in between. So if you prepare, which means, okay, you look at the possibilities. Here's the 3 most likely possibilities. If you have contingency plans for each one, then whatever happens, you're prepared. A lot of times, and we see this a lot because especially when the lottery was huge numbers and people were going like, okay, I'm going to buy a lottery ticket. I'm going to win whatever it is, $1 billion or $500 million, right, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But what else are you going to do if you don't win the $1 billion? You still have to pay rent next month.
That's right.
So make the preparation. Great if you win $1 billion, you know who to call your lawyer, call your accountant, and prepare for all that. Just say you don't. Do you have other contingencies? Are you looking for a job? Are you working someplace you want? Are you going to school and studying and to go to the next phase? Whatever it is, have the contingency plans so that you are not just hoping for the outcome you want without thinking there are other options which might occur that you might not have planned for, which could be quite devastating if you're not prepared for them.
Okay. And here's another one. Be interested in others.
This is so important because a lot of times we, especially now because of a polarized society, we cannot even think that the other person, the other side, and there's always another side, have anything valid to say because they obviously don't understand, because how can they think that way? So we dismiss another person without understanding potentially what drives them. Because nobody's going to say, I'm doing this because it's stupid. You're doing it because you think it's got some good reasons. So when you're interested in others, you grow too. You may never agree with the other person, but you learn something, how they think, how they live their lives. And in that, you can either appreciate your own life more, or you have learned how to bridge and communicate wider, or you learn a new skill, or you learn also maybe just to stay away from something dangerous. So it's not always. Mm-hmm. You're saying, Terry?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, and I love, and I'm happy to hear that you talk about the importance of being interested in other people besides yourself. Yeah, because it's there are so many people, artists and non-artists, that live life selfishly instead of selflessly, or at least inclusively. Yeah, where there's equal value to people outside themselves and their immediate family. That there's a more community or a community and tribal understanding, of how we are all in this together.
Mm-hmm. This world is too small. We cannot just say my life, my family, my friends, my community, because we're all interrelated. Something that's happening in the furthest reach of the earth is impacting us right now. And so the internet, airlines, everything has connected us so much. I mean, it is a global economy, no matter what we think. Something that happens in one country or one area is going to impact us globally. There's no isolation anymore. It's impossible.
Right. Let me move on to another tip that you have, which is stretch. But I want to say that you also talk about, stretch is saying yes to a new assignment or project and then learn how to do it, because you can only improve if you take on new projects and seek help and ask questions. Mm-hmm. But you're talking about the importance of saying yes, but you also in your book talk about the importance of understanding the value of no. In other words, you've said no to your destiny of working the potential destiny as a young child of ending up working in factories, and you were motivated by your dreams to work, to do things internationally. You also, after you got your master's degree at Oregon State University in economics, you again understood the power of saying no to the complacency of, the acceptance of a woman's place in the corporate world. And you became a CEO of 3 amazingly large, important companies, Aveda and Nike and Reebok. And, so can you talk about the balance of, understanding when you're stretching, as you say as a tip in your book, the importance of balancing out the understanding of why no is such a powerful word and why yes is such a powerful word?
Yes, these are such simple words, but they are so powerful because it defines our whole lives. What do we say yes to and what do we say no to? Saying yes to things that really are important to us. That goes back to what we talked about earlier, of life purpose, which is what we talked about too, which is every day we have to say, am I moving closer to what I want? So I'm saying yes to those things, and I'm saying no to things that are bringing me further away. So stretching, as we both said, is really about saying yes to things that are going to bring us closer. I don't know about you, but I know that every job I've ever had, I was never fully prepared for it. Because
yeah, that's accurate for me too.
Because if you were fully prepared for it, this is not a job that's going to give you any growth and any fulfillment, because it'll be like automatic. You just calling in the job. But if you're being stretched, then you're actually getting rewarded because you're growing, you're learning, you're improvising, and your creativity is fully engaged. And at the same time, we have to learn what to say no to, because some things may be, especially in when we're young, a lot of families, mine included, you're always supposed to be nice to people. Don't say that, it'll hurt their feelings. Don't do that because that's going to make you stand out. So we say no to a lot of things that we might want to say yes to because it might not look good. It might not be what is going to be socially accepted. Or we say no to things that that really in our hearts we know is right, but then the facts may not show up at this moment like that way. But sometimes we have to say yes to things that we want and no to things we don't want. And so to know the difference is really the key. And so for me, even though it seemed like a much easier existence just to fall in line and just say, okay, my life was to grow up, be a nice girl, grow up, marry a nice boy, have some nice kids and live a nice house, maybe with a nice dog. But, and there was no ever any concept of what I was going to be as a person.
Right. You're talking about accomplishments versus
right.
intention or basically the essence of who you are and who you become.
We become role players in something that we're told that we should be without thinking what it is that you should be saying yes to and what you should be saying no to. And
right.
No is anything that is not going to make your heart sing.
That makes sense. That's pretty simple. and somehow very complicated for a lot of people to
it's
follow.
Very scary.
Yeah.
But once you learn it's actually very freeing.
It is very freeing, and it leads to your next tip, which is don't be afraid to fail.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Which we've already spoken about earlier in our conversation. But another tip that you give that I am a big fan of is admit your mistakes, learn from them, and use the insights to help you improve.
Mm-hmm. Yes. A lot of people have fear of failure. I think most everyone, because ever since we're young from school, we're graded by whether we pass or fail or how well we do. So this is conditioned in us that we're always looking to get an A, whether we know it or not. So if we look at something which have maybe a chance that we might not make it, we've been trained to avoid it. But if we avoid it, it's like what we just talked about, we're not going to be advancing very much because we are just staying safe. And I used to tell my team, it's the things you talk about, I've used in working with different companies. When I work with company, I always tell my team certain things. This is one of them. Make big mistakes. And they usually look at me with this strange look because they don't know me well yet. And they say, you surely don't mean that. Don't you want to make no mistakes or at most small mistakes, because big mistakes are like expensive. And I said, no, small mistakes means you're careless. When you make no mistakes, it means you took no risk, and we're going to be obsolete in no time because we're going to be doing the same old, and other people are innovating. But if you think you could be making a big mistake, you're going to be doing a lot of strategy and change to make sure that we talked about have contingency plans for each one of these items. So that in case this scenario happens, this is what you're going to do. If this scenario happens, this is what you're going to do. So whenever happens, you take the risk, you innovate, you take that leap forward. If you don't want to do the same thing over and over because you're going to get the same results. And after a while, that's not good enough because other people have innovated and they have grown ahead of you. And think about the people who used to make harnesses for horses for the horse and carriage. What if they made the best one? It's still no good anymore.
Yeah, and I'm remembering right now, a few years ago, I performed for an awards ceremony for the engineers at Disney who are called the Imagineers. And and I spoke to one of the people who had won an award, and it was so cool to talk with him, because I said, "So what's your job actually?" And he said, "Well, they say our job really is to come up with to invent new ideas, new technologies, just to really push the envelope. But really what our job is to fail. Our job," he goes, "it's the best job in the world, because we are in there to make mistakes and to fail so that we can stumble upon or as you were talking about Thomas Edison, you basically just go in there every day. We're encouraged to make mistakes. That's what we get paid to do, because out of that process comes these beautiful inventions and new technologies." And he was like a little kid, explaining, that his job was to go in every day to work and mess up. Because of the freedom that allowed them to come up with these ideas that nobody had previously thought of.
Exactly. And that's so important. Some years ago, I consulted with 3M, the big corporation, and they had their main role inside the campus, because there's a lot of people in the corporation, was Innovation Way. And everybody in the company, all the scientists, not everybody, all the scientists and the researchers in the company, because they're always inventing new stuff, that's their job too,
right,
was they get 20% of their time to do their own thing, whatever it is that was going to be helpful maybe to the company. And out of this was the Post-it note. Because what it was they're innovating a new glue, and this glue wasn't working. And instead of saying, well, that's failure, they said, this is very interesting. I wonder what we can do with this weird glue. And it became the Post-it note. And of course, it expanded past the Post-it note. Then make it for wallpaper that you can use in rentals. So like if you rent a place and you want to have wallpaper, but then, you cannot allow wallpaper if you rent a place. But this wallpaper you can peel off when you leave. I mean, so it had a lot of extension into different things, because they were just supposed to fail. And then failing in the 20% time, 80% they're supposed to be productive, but 20% of the time they can just mess up. And this came from that mess up. So it comes out in different ways.
So we have 10 minutes left in our conversation. And before I get to our closing questions, I want to talk about the title of your most recent book, which is The Happiness Choice, which basically implies that there's a choice, that people can choose happiness or not, that there's not this victim mentality of, well, some people are happy and some people aren't, or these things happen to me, so I can't be happy. What's your philosophy that inspired you to write this book, The Happiness Choice?
Thank you. It's so true that a lot of people, when they're in the midst of living their day-to-day lives, as they say, well, you don't understand because I have to do this. They don't feel like they have a choice. There's always a choice. A good example of that is Viktor Frankl. Are you familiar with him?
I don't recall who that is.
Okay. Viktor Frankl is a Holocaust survivor. He wrote a book called, I'm not going to say the name exactly right, but it basically is The Meaning of Man.
Okay.
And the reason, and it's a best-selling book. It's sold, I think it's one of the best-selling books of all time. Mm-hmm. Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist. And he was reasonably well known by a time when the Nazis were taking over his part of the world. And he had a choice. He had the permission to take himself and his wife to come to America or stay there, be with his parents. And he chose to stay with his parents. Unfortunately, they were all taken to, Auschwitz as one of the camps. Mm-hmm. And what he did there is what transformed his life. He, being a psychiatrist, he was there observing people in very dire conditions, which anybody would say, well, they have no choice, and they're not going to say, can I have another, blanket, or may I have some more food, or why are you beating me? I mean, it would seem like these people have absolutely no choice. But in that place, he found that there are three kinds of people. They're the optimists, the pessimists, and the people like himself. The pessimists, let's talk about the optimists. The optimists is thinking, get up and say, tomorrow they're going to give us food. Tomorrow they're going to quit beating us. And in time, when they didn't do those things, they got more and more depressed and eventually, of course, succumbed to illness and all the other terrible things that was happening to them. And they died. The pessimists said, well, tomorrow they're going to beat us. Tomorrow they're not going to give us any food. And they too died because they had no hope. Now, the people like Viktor Frankl, what he was, he said, these people can imprison my body. They can beat me. They cannot give me food. But I have freedom of choice in me, in my thinking. And he says, I am going to survive because I can't wait to see my family again. I gave up so much so that I can be with my wife and my parents again. And that's what held him and gave him hope through, I think, 3 years of extreme conditions. At the end of it, unfortunately, he found out that his family actually all perished in the camps. Mm. But he took that and he wrote a book and he started this whole practice around how if you have the feeling of choice, you can transform anything. Mm-hmm. And that's why he lived. And his whole practice and his whole work, which is why it was such a powerful work from his life on, is that we always have a choice. Even in the direst, most miserable, wretched circumstances, and I can't think of anything worse than what he had to endure. Right. He did. He survived because he said, I have choice. They cannot change my thoughts. My choice is I choose to observe. I choose to know that I have choice. And that's really the defining moment.
That makes sense.
Mm.
We have 5 minutes left, so I'm going to ask you very important questions with short answers, and we could take an hour on each of these answers. So I've got 3 things to ask you. The first is a 2-part question. What does making it mean to you both personally and professionally? The second part of the question is, can you share 3 tips for success that have driven your career?
Mm-hmm. Making it, as you have called in your show, is achieving what it is that you want. Making it is different for each person. So I would say making it is coming to a place where you are comfortable and happy with whatever you have achieved. And the second part of the question?
Can you share 3 tips for success that have driven your career?
Knowing what it is that you're living for, following it, and knowing that you have what it takes inside of you to achieve it.
And my final question, Marilyn, and it's a question that I ask all of my guests, but very interesting to me. This is a question that you've addressed in previous interviews and on your webpage. So I know some of the answer, but I'd like for you to answer again in the moment. At this point of your life, with everything that you know to be true, what would you tell your younger self?
Every time I think about this, I come up with different things. But now today, I would just say, I love you. Because knowing that you are loved transforms everything. And even if it's just loving yourself, and then you're good enough. I love you. You're good enough. That's all we need.
Yeah, that's what every little child needs to hear. Mm-hmm. And every grown child. needs to be reminded of. In our last 2 minutes of our show, I'd like to turn it over to you. What would you like to leave our listeners with?
To tell them to say the same thing to themselves. Love yourself and you are good enough. Because truthfully, once you have those two things anchored in you, you can achieve anything. And I love you too.
Tell everybody the name of your 3 books and where they can find more about you and of course, get your books and read your blog and everything else.
Mm-hmm. Well, first, my website, because you can find it all on my website. And it's very simple. It's just my name, MarilynTam.com. So it's MarilynT as in Tom, AM. So MarilynTam.com. And then my latest book is The Happiness Choice, the 5 decisions that will take you from where you are to where you want to be, which is what we talked about today, the happiness choice. And there's a very small ebook that I did in between, which is called Living the Life of Your Dreams. And then my first book, which I wrote because people kept asking me, how did you achieve what you did? So I said, yes, you can do it too. And that book is called How to Use What You've Got to Get What You Want. How to Use What You've Got to Get What You Want. And all of them, you can find out more of them on my website, MarilynTam.com.
Thank you, Marilyn, for that. There's, in summary, there's a quote I want to read of yours, which is, you are here for a reason. You have a unique gift to offer the world. Once you find your special talents and pursue it, whether it be the best carpenter, accountant, singer, mother, or nuclear physicist that you can be, you will have a sense of inner peace. You will feel that you have found your reason for being. You may have several talents, and you have the choice to follow one or a combination of them. And you end it with, what an exciting adventure, which I love. and it is true. So we have 30 seconds left, and I'll turn it over to you.
I'll say thank you, Terry, because what you're doing is truthfully allowing other people to live their happiness choice because you are living yours. So thank you for what you do, and you are definitely making it.
As are you and all the people that you touch. Marilyn, thank you so much for spending the hour with me. Thank you, everybody, for joining us and listening. And I really appreciate your time and your expertise and all the work that you continue to do. Marilyn Tam, it's been a pleasure, and we'll see everybody next week. Thanks for joining us.
Next week for another great episode of Making It with Terry Woman.